In today's video, I'm going to show you the 6 best ways to stake your Ethereum or Ether tokens, and I'm going to break each method down by difficulty, reward, and risk. So let's not waste any time and jump right in. I'm going to start with the easiest ways to stake ETH 2.0 and then work my way up to the most difficult. And as you can probably guess, the reward or ROI or percentage APR that you'll get on your ETH staking generally tends to increase as the difficulty increases, although it's not exactly linear and there's a couple exceptions, which I'll show you. So the first and easiest way that you can stake your ETH tokens is through a centralized exchange. So for example, your Coinbases or your Binances, but obviously not your FTXs. Now the reason this is the simplest way to stake ETH is that you purchase it and stake it in exactly the same platform, and it's only a couple of clicks and you're done. So for example, with Coinbase, once you've purchased it, you'll have an opportunity to stake it, and the same thing applies to Binance. Once you purchase ETH on the platform, you can stake it easily with just a few clicks. Now obviously this method of ETH staking is not without its risks. So for example, if what happened to FTX over the past week happens to Coinbase or to Binance, then you could be at risk of losing the money that you stake with them with your Ether token. And that's definitely a risk you would take if you stake with any centralized staking service where you're not in control of your own ETH tokens. You're basically giving it to someone and they're staking it for you, and you have to trust that they're actually going to pay the percentage return that you're supposed to be getting, and then also be able to return the full amount of the ETH that you staked whenever you want it, as opposed to going belly up and not having enough money if there's a bank run, which is exactly what happened with FTX. So that is the major risk with this method of staking. And then when it comes to the rewards of this method of staking, you're going to take home slightly less than you would if you staked completely by yourself, for example, because of course the Coinbase validators are going to take a small percentage of the staking yields. And it's important to say at this point that ETH staking yields are actually variable, and it depends on how many people are staking ETH at any given time, and also on how many people are using the network, because as people complete transactions, then those people give small tips to the people that are validating the transactions, which comes through in the yield as well. And so it does vary. Currently, it's approximately 5.3% APR. But like I said, even though it is a variable rate, you won't get the full amount if you stake through Coinbase, for example. They will take a small percentage of it, so you'll get slightly less than 5.3 or whatever the variable rate is at the time when you stake your ETH. The second easiest way to stake your ETH is to purchase something called a liquid staking derivative. Now that sounds complicated, but the beauty of liquid staking derivatives is that you exchange Ether for staked Ether tokens, which represent the value of Ethereum, and they actually increase in value over time as the rewards for staking accrue to them. So one perfect example is Lido, and they're the largest by far of the providers of this service, but there's others including Rocket Pool, Stakewise, Stakefish. And so if you give 1 ETH to Lido, then they'll give you 1 ETH back in exchange, and then over time, the value of that will actually accrue and it'll be worth more than 1 Ether. And the benefit of this staking model is that you can actually sell your staked ETH tokens whenever you want. Whereas if you're actually running your own validating node, for example, you can't currently withdraw the ETH that you're putting up as collateral to be a staker. So this method allows you to be liquid, hence the liquid staking derivatives. Now, in terms of how easy it is, it's pretty simple. You can either purchase these tokens on an exchange or on a decentralized exchange, or you can go to the page like Lido, and you can even access this through the Ledger app or the Trezor app if you're using a hardware wallet, and you can exchange your ETH for staked ETH tokens in those places. So it's pretty simple. All you have to do is have Ether in an Ethereum wallet, and it takes a couple of clicks and you're done. In terms of the reward, it's kind of similar to staking through a centralized exchange like Coinbase, and obviously the Lido validators are taking a percentage of the staking yield, and then you're getting, slightly less than the full amount. And according to stakingrewards.com, currently if you stake with Rocket Pool's liquid staking, you can get 4.42% per year, but if you stake with Lido's liquid staking, you can get 4.72% per year. So it's approximately the same as, for example, staking through a centralized service, but the risks are slightly different. Whereas when you give your ETH to Coinbase or Binance, you have to trust that they are actually going to uphold what they're promising to do, which is pay out the rewards and then give you back your ETH whenever you want it. Well, in this case, you have to trust that the smart contracts that are set up for you to exchange ETH for staked ETH won't break, that there won't be a hack, and that someone won't be able to come in and steal all the money. Also, in the case of Lido, there's a limited number of validators in a validating pool, and so you also have to trust that those validators are going to be honest. It's better than giving them to one centralized service provider like Coinbase, but it's not as good as a fully decentralized model. And so actually on this chart here, you can see some of the different staking providers that offer liquid staking derivatives, and Rocket Pool is actually one of the best in terms of being open source and being permissionless and trustless, whereas Lido is slightly not as good because, like I said, there is that limited pool of validators that you do have to trust. And one final risk, at least currently with this staking method, is that ETH and staked ETH, wherever it's from, could actually depeg. And this is because some people could be trading it at a discount because they're trying to factor in the risk that, for example, Ethereum staking withdrawals are not actually enabled at any point in the future or at any point in the near future, because obviously if that doesn't happen, it means everybody that's staked their ETH won't be able to actually withdraw it, which would be a massive problem. So sometimes you do see staked ETH trading at a discount to ETH, and for example in this screenshot here you can see that it was trading at 0.987, so a 1.3% discount to what it should be. However, these discrepancies should go away once ETH staking withdrawals are actually enabled, which is supposed to happen at some point in 2023. All right, so the third easiest way to stake your Ether tokens is actually to do leveraged staking with liquid staking derivatives as well. And just by the name, you can probably already tell that this is going to be much higher on the risk factor and also higher on the reward factor, but it is pretty easy. It's very similar to purchasing Lido staked ETH or Rocket Pool staked ETH. You can purchase leverage stake ETH tokens with service providers like Index Co-op that offer APYs in excess of 20%. Currently, ICETH is paying about 24% per year. But while it is relatively simple to get this leveraged staked ETH and the rewards are pretty attractive, of course that does not come without risk. Now, how this works basically is that ICETH or Index Co-op ETH is taking Ethereum and then it's taking out loans against that Ethereum and then purchasing staked ETH with that and then repeating the process several times, creating this compounding effect, and the loans are being paid off partially with the return that comes from the ETH staking. And so this token, ICETH, is staked at a 3.1x leverage. Now the main risks with this method are, first of all, there is smart contract risk. So for example, if the code is somehow not up to standard and it's hackable, then there is that risk there. And then of course there is the liquidation risk. So for example, if there's too much price volatility, or if it gets too over levered, or if staked ETH depegs from regular ETH for any significant amount of time and any significant margin, then there is the risk that overall there could be a liquidation event. Also, if too much ETH gets deposited into the ETH staking ecosystem, then that brings the staking yields down and it could make it more difficult for the interest on the loans that are occurring on this leverage model to be paid off. So there's also a risk with the yield rate of the staked Ethereum. So there's definitely a few risks here. All right, next up we have the fourth easiest method, which is ETH as a staking service. Now basically what you need for this is 32 ETH. So there is some difficulty in that sense, in that you have to have a pretty significant amount of capital to actually participate in it. But once you have that, the beauty of ETH as a staking service is that you don't need to actually purchase equipment and run the validator node yourself. You don't have to handle all of the software and anything like that. All you have to do is have the 32 ETH and earn the yield from that. According to stakingrewards.com, you can earn approximately 4.79% per year with this method, so slightly more than if you were just purchasing Lido staked ETH or Rocket Pool staked ETH. And again, relatively simple. You don't have to deal with equipment or anything like that. There's different options for staking providers with different trade-offs in terms of decentralization or being open source, and so the risks depend on which you choose. But generally, I'd say the risk level is pretty similar to if you were just purchasing a Lido staked ETH or a Rocket Pool staked ETH token. You have custody of your own assets, but there is smart contract risk and potentially some open source issues, and the decentralized versus centralized, trustless versus non-trustless risks that you have to weigh off. All right, the fifth easiest way to stake your Ether tokens, and now we're getting into the realm of the more difficult, where you actually have to purchase equipment and download software and deal with that aspect of things. But you can actually be a validator in these staking pools that I've been talking about. So for example, if you wanted to validate with Rocket Pool as opposed to just holding Rocket Pool staked ETH, what you need to do is get your hands on 16 Ether tokens, also some Rocket Pool RPL token collateral, and then Rocket Pool gives you 16 ETH, which has been pooled from other people, and then with that, you can actually spin up your own validating node, and you have to pay out the rewards to the other 16 ETH that you've collected from the pool, and then you get whatever's left over. Now this is much more complex because you actually do have to purchase equipment and run the software, the validating node, on that hardware equipment in your home. So you do need to have an energy source and a reliable source of internet. Now the reward for this, generally if you have good uptime on your node, is going to be better than if you were just holding the Rocket Pool staked ETH token, because you do get additional rewards in exchange for actually having to deal with the equipment and the software. On the other hand, if you're not a reliable validator and you have, for example, a lot of downtime, then you run the risk of getting less rewards and also even of having your collateral slashed. So there is risk in that sense. Also, as with most of the other methods here, there is smart contract risk. All right, so the sixth and final way that you can stake your ETH, and this is, in my opinion, the most difficult, is to be a solo validator, which means you're not getting pooled ETH from anyone else. You have to put up all your own collateral, so you need at least 32 ETH, and you have to have the equipment, and you have to have the software, and you have to have, again, a reliable internet connection, and of course, a steady source of power. And once you have all of these things, then you can actually spin up your own validator node. Now this is the best actually for the Ethereum network because you participate in validating transactions, but you're not beholden to anybody else. So you're upholding the decentralized nature of the network. Now, of course, the main benefit of this method of staking is that you get all of the rewards, all of the tips, all of the money. So depending on whatever the variable rate is of Ethereum staking, you get 100% of that, which is great. Now, on the risk side, currently, you can't actually withdraw that, and this isn't a liquid staking derivative method. So that means that your 32 ETH and whatever ETH you're making as a validator in terms of your rewards is locked in the contract until there's a hard fork and withdrawals are enabled, which could happen sometime next year, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. And that is really the main risk of this method of staking. If, for example, Ethereum goes down, or if they don't enable withdrawals soon enough, then that is a risk. So you have to weigh whether or not you think Vitalik and all of the other Ethereum core developers are actually going to deliver on what they're promising, because if they do, then there's little risk here, but if they don't, then of course you're probably screwed. Anyways, those are the 6 best ways that you can stake your Ether tokens, ranked by level of difficulty from easiest to hardest. Hopefully you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next video.